The Committee to Protect Journalists has published its annual prison census. The census documents every journalist in jail around the world. This includes profiles of each of the 320 behind bars in 2023. So to get more of an understanding on the census, we're joined via video link by Muthoki Mumo, Committee to Protect Journalists Sub-Saharan Africa representative based in Nairobi. A very good afternoon to you, Muthoki, and thank you for your time with us here on the SABC at this hour.
Thank you very much for having me. As just noted, we've recently published our annual prison census, which is a report that looks at journalists behind bars around the world. And what we found is that in 2023, we recorded our second highest figures of journalists behind bars. That's 320, slightly lower than the 367 of 2022. But still indicative of the oppression and hostility that we're seeing against journalists in many parts of the world.
Right, so unpacking that a little bit further, as we look at the near record numbers emerging for 2023, what are the charges that they are facing?
So what we've seen is that journalists often face what we call anti-state charges. A common anti-state charge is terrorism, where we see critical journalism being equated with terror activities. In our region, this is something that we've seen historically in Cameroon and also in Ethiopia. And we also see journalists facing charges where accused of challenging the official narratives of the state. And increasingly, we're concerned about the use of false news allegations to criminalize journalism, where frequently we see that critical journalism or journalism that does not align with official narratives is being equated with false news, and countries are using laws to throw journalists behind bars for this kind of journalism.
The question about the accuracy of the charges comes to the fore, the validity of the charges as well, even how they are arrested, the awareness as well in terms of the charges that they're facing. What's emerged on that front according to the data?
So this is a very interesting question. And often we're concerned about journalists facing trumped-up charges where if you do an analysis or look at what is being produced in court, you can see very clearly that this is a very thin veneer only meant to silence a reporter or editor or critical television commentator. Now, we're also concerned that sometimes due process is not followed. We've documented many instances where journalists are detained in prolonged pre-trial detention, thrown behind bars for weeks, if not months, in places like Ethiopia. We had such one case in Burundi, without being told the exact case against them. So the charges, when they come along, we see them being retaliatory, sometimes trumped up, but sometimes those charges never even materialize. You know, authorities say investigating an offense and never actually charge a journalist.
We're talking as reading the data, and also what comes to the fore is perhaps also journalists in war zones and what's affected, or how they're affected on that front. I'm asking this because I saw that Israel emerged as one of the world's leading jailers of journalists following the October Israel-Hamas attack. Talk to us more about that. What concerns also arise on that front?
So if we look at the general data, the negative picture that we have for freedom around the world, part of it we can attribute to decline of democratic norm, creeping authoritarianism, but we also see that the spark of conflict in various areas of our globe has been correlated with increased aggression against members of the press. And as you rightly pointed out, the Israel-Gaza war features prominently in our reporting currently because Israel, for the first time, has been, among the top jailers of journalists in the world for the detention of Palestinian journalists. But you don't have to go that far to see the correlation between conflict and imprisonment of journalists. We can look in our neighborhood in Africa, where for 2 years of a civil war, press freedom conditions deteriorated drastically in Ethiopia. And despite the signing of a recent agreement in 2022, Ethiopia remains restive, and also Ethiopia is one of the worst journalists in the world. We can talk about Cameroon, and we've seen the conflict being correlated with the detention of journalists for years there.
All right, Muthoki, thank you very much for joining us on the SABC for your time at this hour. Muthoki Mumo, in fact, is from the Committee to Protect Journalists, Sub-Saharan Africa representative, joining us live from Nairobi, unpacking the Committee to Protect Journalists annual prison census. We're looking at the data emerging. We've seen the census documents every jailed journalist around the world. And to date, there are now 320 that are behind bars as of 2023 December. Again, thank you to Muthoki for time with us here at this hour.